let's make some 1-inch Dungeons and Dragons paper miniatures. So I've been pretty busy lately, and I thought it would be fun to get away from the computer and do a little bit of drawing by hand. And I was flipping through one of my zines called Beyond the Borderlands by Alex, aka Gnarled Monster. I'll have it linked down in the description. And I got to the back of issue 2, and there was this great list of monsters and NPCs with wonderful little illustrations that looked like they were kind of crammed into a square, and it got me thinking about paper miniatures, and I just thought it would be really fun to make some 1-inch by 1-inch miniatures. So I went ahead and made this little red wizard miniature just to test things out, and I had a lot of fun making it, and I thought, okay, it's time to make a video, bring you along with my process, and make a bunch of these little dudes. So I'm going to be using Posca markers on Bristol board, which is basically just like thick drawing paper. I'll also need a ruler, a pencil, a hobby knife, or I guess some scissors will work. And I'll be gluing up the miniatures with rubber cement, but glue stick or double-sided tape, any sort of glue or tape that works well with paper will do just fine as well. So I wanted to keep this whole process super simple, so I made a very basic template. It's just a 1-inch wide strip that you're gonna cut out, and there are 4 sections that sort of fold in on each other. There's a 1/2 inch tall by 1 inch wide section at the top, then 2 1-inch by 1-inch squares, and then another 1/2 inch rectangle down at the bottom. I spent just a little bit of time ruling out 10 of these templates onto my Bristol board, and then I cut out each strip with my X-Acto knife. And before I move on to actually drawing the miniatures, there is one more very important step, and that is scoring the folds of the template. So I take my X-Acto knife and very lightly pull it across the horizontal lines where the miniature is gonna fold down. Even though it kind of looks like it in the footage, I'm not cutting the miniature, I'm just ever so slightly, ultra gently pulling the knife across, just enough to sort of weaken the fibers of the paper. So later on, when it's time to fold the miniature down, it makes it effortless and wonderful, and hopefully you get the idea and you'll see how it works later in the video. Now that the templates are all prepared and ready to go, I can start drawing, start getting into the fun stuff. Of course, I quickly remembered that drawing things at this scale is a little bit tricky. You know, cramming a whole character down into a 1-inch square is a challenge, but the cool thing about it is that it just forces you to keep things super simple. And I think Alex's drawings from the Beyond the Borderlands zines are a great example of this. You know, their style, it's like 1/3 of the square is taken up by the head of the character, 1/3 is by the body, and 1/3 is by the legs. Or, I don't know, maybe sometimes it's like 1/2 of the square is taken up by the head and then the rest is the body. So I'm kind of keeping that in mind when I draw these characters. They're just big eyes and a mouth, no nose, no crazy poses or anything like that. The character's just kind of crammed in this little 1-inch square. So it's probably a little bit difficult to see, but I'm using a non-photo blue mechanical pencil to sketch out these characters. It's almost like a light blue colored pencil, but the reason I'm using this instead of a normal pencil is because the Posca markers will go over top of it really nice. But if you only have a normal pencil, that works totally fine as well. Okay, so now I have all of my characters sketched out, ready to go. It's time to start laying in some color. So I'm using Posca markers, but you can use whatever types of tools you want. Just keep in mind that this is drawing very small, so things that don't have much precision, like crayons or something like that, might not be the best, but really just use whatever you feel comfortable with. And you know, now that I'm thinking about it, the cool thing about drawing these small miniatures is that it doesn't take long to draw. You can experiment with whatever tools you want and easily just make some more templates and try it again if you don't like the way it looks. It's easy to redo things and change things around, start over. It's not a big deal. Just have fun with it. Okay, so I stinking love these Posca pins. They're paint pins, so they're meant to like use on anything. Like their whole thing is you can draw on whatever kind of surface you want on a piece of paper on a wall, on glass, on whatever. But I love them because they lay down this like solid, really bright, opaque color. And I always say it feels like I'm drawing a screen print. You know, the colors don't really mix together. Everything's super solid. And for that reason, I like to start with the actual colors first and draw in the blocks of color and then go back over and outline them after everything's blocked in and the paint is dry. Because I'm making a bunch of these miniatures, one thing I'm trying to keep in mind as I color them is just to vary up some of the colors. You know, it'd be very easy for me to make everything like green and blue because those are kind of my favorite colors to use. So I'm trying to be conscious of throwing in some brown and some orange and purple and pink and get some other colors going so that these miniatures have a variety of looks. Because you don't want to lay down a bunch of miniatures on the table and they all look super the same and you can't tell which one is which and all that stuff. I guess one thing I do want to look into is to see if Posca has more colors that just come in these packs. I have like the standard pack and then the pastel pack. I'd like to get a few more colors, especially some different skin tones. I need just a little bit more variety to be totally happy making an assortment of different characters like this. So I'm just kind of knocking out each miniature one by one, but once I have the color blocked in, then I go to the outlining stage of things. And I want to tell you about this Posca marker, the PC-1MR. I have no idea what those numbers mean. It's basically a 0.7 millimeter black Posca pin. It feels like I'm drawing with a micron, so it's like a nice uniform line, but it puts down this awesome opaque black line. I love it so much. I've talked on this channel before about how I love the big fat bullet tip Posca marker. That thing's awesome, but this PC-1MR might be my favorite of the Posca markers. It just feels so fun once all the color's down, going over top of it and outlining it and making these characters come alive with this nice, beautiful, thick for a 1 inch by 1 inch drawing, thick black outline. Before moving on, one thing I should mention is that I haven't illustrated the backs of the miniatures. Honestly, I think these things are really just going to end up on my shelf back here, but I will say that if you plan on using them at the table, it could be a lot of fun to go ahead and illustrate the backs of the characters on the backs of the miniatures. Just remember that you gotta flip them so the middle fold of the miniature is kind of like the top. I don't know, you can visualize it in your head and make sure you just line things up correctly. Once the drawing is all done, I fill in the entire template with black. I'm using a thicker marker just to make things go a little faster, but adding this black background on the miniature really makes the bright colors of the Posca stand out. It just really brings the focus onto the character, and they just pop so much more than if I left the paper completely blank and white. And I'm coloring in the back of the template black as well. The whole thing gets colored in just to make things look extra nice when it's all folded down and finished. Speaking of folding things, it is time to assemble the miniatures. So remember the scoring we did earlier, the gentle light cuts along the horizontal lines of the template? To fold the miniatures down, all you have to do is just gently bend the paper kind of in the general area of where you think the fold might be now that it's all covered up by black marker. And really the paper is just gonna fold down on itself perfectly in a straight line, and you're gonna be amazed, and it's so satisfying watching these perfectly straight folds happen with just the gentlest of touch. So yeah, each miniature, 3 folds, kind of all going inward, really, really simple, especially if you did the scoring earlier in the process. Now, to actually secure the miniature shut so it stands up on its own, I'm going to be using rubber cement to glue the pieces together. Like I said before, glue stick, double-sided tape, whatever you got will work. The cool thing about rubber cement is that it is specifically designed to stick 2 pieces of paper together. So the way to use it correctly is to put a little glue on one piece of paper and a little glue on another piece of paper, wait for it to dry, and then stick them together. So that's what I'm doing here with this miniature. As you can see, it sort of folds in on itself, so one section gets the glue on the underside, and then one section gets it on the top side, or I guess the back side. And then I'm just gonna let everything dry before sticking these suckers together. And the other cool thing about rubber cement is that if things get a little messy and you spill some somewhere or get some on the actual miniature and you don't want it to be there, let it dry and then you can just rub it off with your finger. It's great stuff, even though it smells horrible and probably isn't good to be breathing. I should have opened a window. Okay, so now all the miniatures are assembled. We could call it there, but I'm sure you noticed these sort of white sections on the side where the miniature got cut out, and where I folded it down, there's these bright white lines happening on this beautiful dark black miniature. So the very last step is to take the black Posca marker and run it very carefully over the sides of the miniature, filling in these white fold and cut marks. Okay, so you've made it this far. I really hope that this video has inspired you to give making these paper miniatures a try. If you were intimidated at all by the drawing process, I have a few other videos on the channel that explain how to draw things really simply. Like you don't have to have any drawing ability to draw cool looking characters. So check those out. There should be a card popping up. You can check that out. And really, I just want to say, like, doing this stuff is so rewarding. Being able to slam down a handmade miniature onto the table when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or whatever game is just the most awesome and rewarding feeling. And you know, it's even satisfying and rewarding if they just sit up on your shelf as well. Let me know what you think of the miniatures down in the comments. If you do make your own miniatures, please send me some pictures of them. I would love to see what you come up with. If you'd like to support this channel, me making these videos, check out my Patreon. The link is down in the description. Every month I release a new tabletop role-playing game adventure. I put a lot of work into them. I'm very proud of them. And if you want a fun zine in the mail every month or a PDF in your inbox, definitely check that out. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!